So let's start with the hypothalamic pituitary pathways. These pathways go from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary, and there's separate pathways that have different anatomy that go to the posterior pituitary. And then there's multiple hormones involved in each pathway. So pretty complex and pretty cool. So I'm going to draw a zoomed in picture of this piece right here. This is a sagittal section of the brain, right? You should recognize that. So I'm going to attempt to draw this, and then I'll show you a picture that's pre-drawn by someone else so you can see that as well. You should be drawing this out as well, and that's how you learn this anatomy. We're going to start with the anatomy that connects the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland. So up here, here's our hypothalamus, just below the thalamus in the brain. This is going to be our anterior, so the front of the brain, right? Our eyeballs would be over here, not to scale. And here is posterior. So the cerebellum would be up here somewhere. Remember, the pituitary kind of hangs down a little bit, inferior and more caudal. So here's going to be our posterior pituitary. And here is going to be our anterior pituitary. And the connections between the hypothalamus and each of these regions is going to be different. I'm going to get some different colors here. We're going to do the posterior pituitary in yellow. So I'm just going to draw the cell bodies anywhere up here, right? The hypothalamus is neural tissue. So these are cell bodies of neurons. And what's unique about these neurons is they are going to project all the way down into the posterior pituitary. There's more than one of them, right? And I'm really drawing them, again, anywhere in the hypothalamus. There are certain regions that the hypothalamus would have located, paraventricular nucleus. So what does that mean about the posterior pituitary? It is neural tissue, nervous tissue, because it has the axons of these neurons in it. So I'm going to label one more region here that I did not label before. I think I had it in that previous picture. This stalk right here that connects the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland is called the infundibulum. So these hormones that are released from these neurons, so there are signaling molecules produced in these neurons, in the cell bodies, because that's where stuff is made, right? That's where transcription, translation, processing of things are made. That's where the ribosomes are. Stuff is made up in these cell bodies and transported down, and it's going to then go off into the bloodstream. So these things that are produced, and I just give them names. Let's just give these things names. What's produced here is going to be antidiuretic hormone, also called vasopressin, and oxytocin. These two neurohormones are produced here. They're going to travel down our axon, and they're going to be released into the bloodstream. So these two things are neurohormones. I'm not going to be picky. Once they're in the bloodstream, they're called hormones. So here there's ADH and oxytocin traveling in the blood, right? Yes, they're neurohormones, but they're also hormones. Whatever. They were produced in a neuron. You don't want to call them neurotransmitters. They're not. Okay, won't go there until Second, we've got, so that's the posterior pituitary. That's what we're going to do with it for now. The anterior pituitary, there's also cell bodies, neural cell bodies in the hypothalamus that have very short projections. These are going to connect to a portal system that I probably won't draw perfectly. A portal system is a system of blood vessels that's going to travel, and it's actually a capillary bed. It's a local capillary bed. We'll talk about capillary beds and such more when we get to cardiovascular system. And we'll actually come back to this briefly. The point is here that these blood vessels are going to travel. I want to be accurate here. So I'm going to change this to blue. Why do I do that? Because it's becoming deoxygenated. Kind of the details of this, I just want to be correct. But what I want you to know for now is this is called the portal system. It actually is called the hypophyseal. Another name for pituitary gland is hypophysis. Sorry, I won't call it that often, but you'll see it. So the point of this pathway right here is when hormones are produced in these neurons, neurohormones, they are going to travel, make a different color here, not all the way down into the anterior, I'm sorry, they're going to travel via the blood. So let's say that we've got some neurohormones here. These are going to be tropic hormones. CRH is one example you saw in that stress response. There's a bunch of them. So we'll talk about what those are, but corticotropin releasing hormone is one example. So it's going to be a releasing hormone that causes the release of other hormones. Remember, one stimulus for hormone release is other hormones. So these are going to travel down to the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary is endocrine tissue. So there are cells that produce hormone. When this green hormone reaches the anterior pituitary, it's going to either cause or inhibit the release of other hormones. So it should be actually going out the bloodstream here. Going to erase these here because these hormones are going out the blood to where? The entire body. That's what hormones do. Oops, wrong thing here. So one example would be ACTH, adrenocorticotropin releasing hormone. Adrenocorticotropin hormone. That's going to cause the release of cortisol in the adrenal gland. We'll get there. Right now, I want to focus on the anatomy. So the thing is, axons all the way down to release hormone directly into the bloodstream, nervous tissue, versus shorter axons that release hormone to the bloodstream, this local portal system that then causes the release of different hormones from the anterior pituitary gland. So these are anterior pituitary hormones versus oxytocin and vasopressin were produced in the hypothalamus. Got it? It's a nice picture. So let's go to briefly just reviewing this with a slide, picture that someone else drew. So here is a nice image of that same idea. Here are the neurons in the hypothalamus. It's harder to see, it's why I have to draw this myself. These ones are going down and traveling all the way down here to the posterior pituitary, just like I just drew for you. I'm going to choose a different color here. These ones are traveling just right here to release hormone into this portal system that then travels to the anterior pituitary, and there are going to be different hormones produced in the anterior pituitary. So the anterior pituitary is endocrine tissue. You'll see this in lab. But so this is endocrine tissue. And you should kind of recognize what endocrine tissue looks like. This is glandular. It's actually epithelial tissue that is kind of big cells that produce hormone. This is neural tissue. Hey, that looks like white matter. It's the axons of neurons. So you'll see this in the lab as well. Those look different because they're different tissues.